Let's learn about injuries. Jake Browning's cool, right? I mean, he's a cool guy, but he's cool in relation to, like, he came off the field with the bum hand. It was a cramp, and then he came back in the game, and he's fine, and he's going to play against the Vikings, and it's awesome. But you don't often hear about hand cramps. Well, we had one with Jake. Also, Justin Jefferson says he's going to play. That was scary on Sunday when he took a blow to the chest that required a trip to the hospital. How does that work? Plus, the Chargers' Justin Herbert has a busted finger. What's his timeline going to look like? We'll spend some time on that. And the Tyreek Hill injury was interesting as well on Monday Night Football because he hurt the ankle. He didn't come out of the game, but he didn't play as much. But they really weren't treating him while he was just standing there next to his coach on the sideline. So we're going to talk about all these injuries and more with our buddy Dr. John Fritch from Ortho-Cincy. He'll join us when we come back. We're at the Moorline Lager House for Moe's Happy Hour on a Wednesday afternoon. ESPN 1530 Cincinnati Sports Station.
Cincinnati's ESPN.
House. Chris Rose from NFL Network is going to be on our show at 5:05. He's got the call Saturday. Bengals Vikes at 1 o'clock. If you're coming to that game, come to the Moorline Lager House. Before, after, during, in between, Bengals Vikes, UC down the street. Speaking of Bengals Vikes, here's the good news. Jake Browning, good to go. You know, he came out of the game against the Colts, and for a few minutes, A.J. McCarron came in, and Browning came back in and handed the ball off a bunch of times, and he is good to go. And Justin Jefferson says he's going to play. Both Jake Browning and Justin Jefferson were taken out of their respective games. With Justin Jefferson, it was a trip to the hospital with a chest issue. So I want to talk about these two guys and more with Dr. John Fritch from Ortho-Cincy Orthopaedic Sports Medicine. We do this conversation every single Wednesday with one of the experts from Ortho-Cincy about injuries, and it's typically NFL injuries. The awesome thing about Ortho-Cincy is they've got specialists and locations all across the tri-state. They also have walk-in orthopedic urgent care at 5 tri-state locations and extended evening and weekend hours in both Edgewood and Anderson. Learn more at orthocincy.com. That's orthocincy.com. Dr. John Fritch, good to have you. Let's start with Jake Browning. So he suffered from muscle cramps in his right hand. He came out of the game, and then he came back, appeared to be given an IV, came back, and there didn't appear to be any lingering effects. Most of us don't associate cramps with the hand. So do injuries like this, do these situations happen that often?
No, absolutely. So, yeah, I mean, to be honest, some go down and run to the locker room, scared the crap out of me. But we taking a look, I'm just glad he's doing okay now. If we take a look back, he went to the ground after a pass with the thumb bent into his palm and was kind of working on getting it straightened back out. It made sense that it was a cramp. Not the most common type of injury to happen with football players, but really it happens from overuse and overexertion. I mean, you take a look at Browning had 24 passes. It was cold out. It's possible he overworked his thumb muscles enough that they were starting to cramp out and just gave him some trouble.
Are hand and thumb cramps rare?
Kind of depends on what sort of activities you're doing. Certainly, if you're using the thumb and hand repetitively, like he was that game, it can happen. I mean, we see it more commonly in people with repetitive hand motions, like musicians and people that got to type. But, it is something we see.
How was this likely treated?
Just usually with exactly what he did, giving it a little bit of a rest, stretching it out. So, like you can see, he was pulling his thumb out straight to really stretch that flexor muscle to prevent from cramping. And then hydration. There's likely an element of dehydration, and so getting that IV of fluids certainly helped him out.
Bengals play the Vikings on Saturday. It feels like we're going to see Justin Jefferson. And look, he left their game after missing forever with a hamstring strain. He plays on Sunday, then he leaves. He took a hard hit while he was trying to make a leaping catch. They checked him out on the sideline, and then they took him to a hospital. And maybe I shouldn't do this, but I fear the worst. When I read he's been taken to the hospital with a chest issue, that doesn't sound good. Fortunately, he was released, and it feels like, again, he's got a pretty good chance to play against the Bengals on Sunday. The diagnosis here is a chest contusion. What is a chest contusion?
Yeah, so fortunately, it wasn't anything worse. The chest contusion, based on the hit he had, most likely is bruised ribs or sternum, maybe even the joint between the ribs and sternum there. But fortunately, isn't a break.
So what do they look for? What sort of tests were performed to make the determination that not only is he going to be okay to play on Saturday, but he could just leave the hospital and be good to go?
Yeah, my guess is out of an abundance of caution, they took him to the hospital. They got a chest x-ray to make sure he didn't have broken ribs. Also take a look at his lung silhouettes to make sure his lungs were getting oxygen. They may have done a CAT scan as well to make sure he didn't bruise his lungs, to make sure he's breathing okay. The fact that they released him, though, and said he's likely to be able to return to play here soon is reassuring that it wasn't a serious injury.
And then obviously he's going to play, so what precautions are taken to make sure that he gets through the game all right?
Yeah, my guess is the same precautions that we normally do for rib fractures or bruises, typically a little extra padding, making sure he's getting good deep breaths, he's able to go through the motions in practice. I don't think anything too drastic.
I want to ask you about Tyreek Hill, the Miami Dolphins wide receiver, who is going to be given MVP consideration. In the game on Monday, he suffered an ankle injury, but he runs off on his own power. He comes back in the game, but he's not playing every snap. And when he's not playing, he's not sitting down. There were no obvious treatments. He was basically just standing next to his coach. So kind of walk me through the sideline treatment options that were allowing him to play and why nothing was really being done when he wasn't actively in the game.
Yeah, my guess is he had an ankle sprain. These are very common injuries in football, and usually you want to keep them up on their feet. And the more you sit down and give it a rest, at least when you're in the heat of things, it'll tend to stiffen up and give you trouble. The kinds of things we do are icing it down, spatting him, or essentially bracing it up to give him some extra support so he doesn't have as much motion through that area. But, I mean, clearly an important game. They wanted him to keep playing.
Dr. John Fritch is with us from Ortho Cincy. One more to ask you about. Justin Herbert of the Chargers. His season is over. He had surgery on Tuesday for a fractured index finger. Now, in high school, I broke two fingers. I broke my ring finger and my pinky, and I remember the trainer just shrugging his shoulders going, "Mom, you're just going to have to put it in a bandage and wait." With Justin Herbert, he had surgery. What determines whether surgery is required for a finger fracture?
Yeah, so shame he ended up having to have surgery. But typically if these fractures go into a joint or if they affect his ability to use the finger, meaning there's different areas of bone where tendons attach that allow you to make a fist or open up the hand, if that area breaks, then it's likely to need a surgery to put the pieces back together and pin it or use screws to put it back where it needs to be.
All right, one more. What's his timeline? What's his likely timeline this offseason for coming back next year?
I'm fully anticipating him being able to come back for next year. I guess he'll be in some sort of a mobilization, splint, or cast for the first month to month and a half, and then gradually kind of working on rehab to get his motion and strength back. My guess is he'll be back to doing most normal things in about 3 months, but being a high-level football player he is, hopefully ready for the season next year.
Awesome insight as always. Dr. John Fritch, thank you so much.
Oh, no problem. Take care, Mo. Thanks for having me.
Anytime. Dr. John Fritch from Ortho Cincy. I say this every single week. What we love about Ortho Cincy, specialists and locations all over the tri-state. This includes walk-in orthopedic urgent care during the week from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. And on Saturdays from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. at both Edgewood and Anderson. It's easier because you don't need an appointment, and it's definitely cheaper than going to an ER whenever you have an urgent orthopedic injury. Go to orthocincy.com. That's orthocincy.com. Chris Rose.